Last time, on my boyfriend's boyfriend and me, we were in Phuket, a quiet villa pressed up against the jungle, marble floors that stayed cool underfoot, a pool fed by a natural spring, the kind of place that doesn't ask to be noticed. Michael was glowing, not in a showy way, in a small, private way, a hand on my back as he passed, sitting shoulder to shoulder instead of leaving the careful gap that had become habit, closing the distance between us in ways so small you'd miss them if you weren't paying attention. The static from Pattaya had followed us south, softened, warmed into something gentler. And sitting on the veranda, fresh off a therapy session that had gently reminded me to stop managing everyone else's happiness and start planning a trip for me, I was doing exactly that. What I didn't know was that Michael was also making plans when he said, "Nick might be coming down to stay. Welcome to Act 4. The Event Horizon." It was about 4 in the afternoon, that heavy part of the day in Thailand where the air has simply stopped moving. It just sits on you, like a warm, damp towel that someone has forgotten to remove. We were under the veranda, hiding from that heat. Our travel companions were settled into armchairs around a coffee table. Behind us, 6 feet away, close enough to hear but somehow separate, Michael sat at the outdoor dining table with his laptop open, fingers moving across the keys. The faint smell of mosquito coils drifted around us, barely doing their job judging by the state of my ankles. He said it the way he says most things. No build-up, no shift in register. The same tone he uses to ask whether the latest stock shipment has arrived. Nick might be coming down to stay. I froze. With that particular stillness that arrives when something very large shifts its weight somewhere nearby, even when you can't see it yet. My stomach dropped half an inch. And on my face, a smile. Automatic, immediate. A smile that didn't come from me. It came from a much younger version of me. Old as childhood. Learnt long before I had words for what I was learning. My nervous system figured out early that being calm, easy, agreeable, that was the safest way to keep the world from tilting. So it built this smile like a security system. And decades later, it still trips the wire before I've even registered the threat. I locked eyes with him across those 6 feet. He looked back at me, easy, waiting. And here's what I need to tell you. About us, about me, before we go any further. Our relationship has never been tightly sealed. We have that thing, that queer, long-term thing, where the door isn't open, but it isn't locked either. It sits ajar in a way that most people in our lives know about, but that we don't particularly advertise to the heterosexual neighbors and colleagues. For us, it's always meant a kiss on a dance floor? Fine. A one-night situation when one of us is away? Fine too. Do no harm to each other. Just be home for dinner. And we always have dinner together. Whether the world is ending, whether we've just spent an hour cursing each other's existence, dinner at the table, every night. But once, years ago, something different happened. Michael rekindled an emotional connection with someone else. Not a night, not a dance floor kiss, a parallel life. Dinner at someone else's table. Michael is a man who will tell you, with complete sincerity, that he has enough love for many people. Sometimes, I'm not sure he has enough consideration for even one. It became, for a while, 2 homes, 2 worlds, one man living between them. A young man I genuinely liked, whom Michael loved deeply. A situation that was, in parts, extraordinary, and in other parts, the hardest thing I've ever quietly endured. He's not with us anymore. It was never really spoken about, and it remains in very different ways, a wound for both of us. Something too full of grief and unresolved things to sit with properly, even now. I didn't set limits then. I didn't know how. I thought if I pushed, he'd leave. I thought I needed to be easy to love. I thought my needs were optional. That's the ghost that sits behind this moment on the veranda. The only other time I'd seen this genuine spark and the pain it created for both of us in the end. That's what the smile is protecting. Except this time, something arrived alongside it. Not panic, not collapse. Just a thought, calm and clear as cold water. I need space to think. I need clarity that he's not ready to give. I need to put something on the ground, just so I have somewhere solid to stand. So I said it, gently, but firmly. Okay, well, he's not staying here. You'll need to get him a hotel. Michael nodded. Or maybe he didn't. It was that casual. And turned back to his laptop like I'd confirmed a delivery window. Our companion leaned over and said quietly, "Is he serious?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." And I was fine. Not performing fine, actually fine. Not because it didn't matter, it did. But because for the first time in a situation like this, I'd put something down instead of picking it up and carrying it silently away. What I didn't say, what sat with me quietly over the days that followed, was the other thing. Nick isn't just a beautiful boy who likes Michael. Nick is a money boy. He dances for money, keeps men company for money, sleeps with them when the work requires it. His whole profession is built around seduction, reading men, mirroring desire, making someone feel like the gravitational center of a story. And the spark between them felt real. I'd watched it with my own eyes. But that 1%. The part that wonders whether affection and expertise can feel identical, even to the person feeling it. That 1% was enough to make me quietly afraid. Not for myself, for Michael. And there was something else underneath that. Softer, harder to name. Even if Nick's feelings were real, would he know? Would he be able to feel the difference between wanting and working? Because some professions get into your bones in ways you stop noticing. I spent years in coffee shops, and even now I can't sit in a cafe without clocking the workflow, listening for the steam wand, identifying the barista who's 3 shifts from quitting. The job rewired how I experienced the whole thing. I wondered if seduction had done that to Nick. If every interaction, even the honest ones, had started to carry the faint aftertaste of performance. Whether he'd even know how to find his way to something real. I didn't say any of that. I let the week move forward, and we didn't speak of it again until the night Nick was due to arrive. Around 6 on Friday, I asked where Nick and he were staying. Michael said he still hadn't booked anything. So we sat outside, 10 feet apart, and scrolled through hotels on our phones, not realizing until partway through that we were looking at the same ones, sending each other links, comparing options like colleagues. I helped him look. I didn't book anything. This was his story, not mine. After dinner, I went to his room and laid some things out for him. Not packing. That felt too intimate. Too much like I was joining something I wasn't part of. Just making sure he wouldn't forget anything. I set a small box of condoms on the edge of the bed. I bought them that morning. I chose them. I put them there, deliberately, with my own hands, on the edge of the bed. This thing between them was never really about sex. But desire has its own momentum, and I know Michael, and I needed, a small, practical insurance policy against the chaos of where that momentum might go when nobody's thinking clearly. It was the most quietly complicated thing I did all trip. I stood there for a moment after. Then I called through to the other room. The driver picks you both up at 8:30. I've already sent him the itinerary for you and Nick tomorrow. I'm sharing the ride as far as Pattaya. I don't want to miss my cooking class. 8:30 sharp. Before he ordered his taxi, I asked if he had enough cash for the fare. He said he was out. I reached for my wallet and then stopped, because as he picked up his phone, I caught it again. The same thing I'd noticed weeks ago in Jomtien and filed away without meaning to. A note, crumpled, folded, sitting behind the clear case. Red, visible if you knew to look. I didn't ask. I don't know why. Maybe because the evening already held as much as I could carry. Maybe because some questions, once asked, become the only thing in the room. I handed him the taxi money. I moved around the villa, doing small things, filling the space. And then, no kiss, no goodbye. I didn't even see him leave. He was simply gone. I stood there. And then I picked up my phone and typed, "You didn't even say goodbye. Where's my goodbye kiss?" 3 dots. Then, a row of kiss emojis. A digital pat on the head. I set the phone down. The villa went quiet in that specific way that only happens when someone who fills a room has left it. The tiles felt cooler under my feet. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the only sound in the whole villa, and something hollow opened in my chest. Not heartbreak, not fear. Just the particular ache of generosity that left the room without being seen. And standing there in the quiet of it, I recognized something. Not for the first time. There's a version of generosity that comes from fullness, from having so much that giving costs you nothing. And there's another kind, the kind that comes from somewhere older, the kind that was never really a choice. I had given my perfect day away tomorrow, done it so smoothly, so automatically, that I almost didn't notice I'd done it. And he had walked out the door without looking back. I let him. Because somewhere in me, I still thought love meant holding the door open, even when you were the one standing in the draft. So, I went grocery shopping. Because sometimes that's just what you do when the world tilts. You buy crisps and bottled water and try to keep your footing. Michael sent pictures of the apartment. 2 miles away, 10 light years. We messaged about work, about logistics, about nothing. And then the messages stopped. The silence felt like the air before a storm. Dense, held, waiting. And then my phone buzzed. I took a breath, longer and louder than I expected. The kind that comes from somewhere below conscious thought, a part of your body bracing for what your mind hadn't caught up to yet. Instagram. Nick had posted. First, a video on the back of a motorbike from the airport, arriving in Phuket. Then, the moon, filmed from Michael's balcony. And then, at 10:04 p.m., the one that stopped me. 20 seconds. Anxiety by Dochi humming underneath it. Nick in Michael's black-tiled bathroom, naked. One hand over himself, more gesture than modesty. Turning slowly toward the camera, just enough to show the curve of his hip. Eyes finding the lens, biting his lip. Then, a small, playful flick of his tongue. Something in me dropped. Not because of what was evidently about to happen, But because I understood, in that moment, what this weekend was. This was going to be a chapter Michael carried with him, a cornerstone, a part of the story of how he came back to himself, how he bloomed, how he refound the man he'd been losing track of. And I wouldn't be in it. Not because I'd been replaced, not because I'd lost something, but because I was standing at the event horizon, that strange boundary where something enormous is happening just beyond what you can fully see, where you can feel the pull but you can't cross into it, where light bends and time moves differently, and you are both completely present and entirely outside at the same time. For the first time on this trip, I was unmistakably outside. You've been listening to My Boyfriend's Boyfriend and Me, Act 4, The Event Horizon. Next time, the day splits in two. Two versions of the same Saturday running side by side. One lived in the body, heat, Thai basil, textured and real. One drifting across a phone screen, weightless, curated, just outside the frame. Join me for Act 5, in the space between timelines.